Subscribe to Incredible Detective Stories and enjoy watching. The sound of a 35mm projector is not just a noise, it is a heartbeat, a rhythmic, mechanical pulse that has defined every second of my existence for the last 30 years. Click where hum. Click where hum. 24 frames per second. That is the speed of truth. Anything faster is a lie. Anything slower is a memory. My name is Arthur. I am unseen. I am the man behind the glass. The shadow in the booth, the god of the machine at the old Rialto cinema. To the people down below, in the plush red velvet seats, I don't exist. They don't look up. They look forward, mesmerized by the beam of light I throw over their heads, turning a white screen into a window to another world. I prefer it that way. In the booth, I am safe. In the booth, life makes sense because it has a script. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. But real life is a messy production. Poor lighting, bad dialogue, no continuity. It started on a Tuesday. A rainy Tuesday, the kind that makes the Rialto smell of damp wool and old carpet. We were screening a classic. The Third Man. It's a masterpiece of shadow and light, of Dutch angles and moral ambiguity. I've seen it 400 times. I can recite the zither score in my sleep. The auditorium was mostly empty. It usually is these days. The multiplexes with their IMAX screens and recliner seats have stolen the crowds. We get the purists. The lonely. The drifters looking for 2 hours of warmth. That night, there were maybe 6 people scattered across the orchestra section. I hit the changeover cue perfectly. The second reel took over seamlessly. The cigarette burn flickered in the corner of the frame, and I swapped the machines. My hands move on their own. It's muscle memory. When the credits rolled and the house lights came up, 5 people stood up and shuffled towards the exits, buttoning their coats against the cold waiting outside. One man stayed. He was sitting in the 4th row, dead center. The sweet spot. Audio and visual convergence point. He hadn't moved during the entire film. I watched him through the port glass. I thought he was asleep. It happens. We get homeless folks who buy a ticket just to nap. I began my shutdown sequence. Lamp off, sound amp down, rewind engaged. I waited for the usher, a kid named Leo who spent more time on his phone than working, to go down and wake the guy up. I watched Leo walk down the aisle, his flashlight beam cutting through the dusty air. He nudged the man's shoulder. From the booth, I saw Leo recoil. He dropped the flashlight. It rolled under the seats, casting a frantic, spinning strobe light across the floor. Leo screamed. It was a thin, high sound muffled by the glass. But I heard it. I didn't run. I never run. I locked the booth habit and walked down the narrow, winding metal stairs. When I got to the 4th row, the smell hit me first. Not the metallic tang of fresh blood, but something sweeter, almonds, and the stench of cheap gin. The man was slumped forward. He wore a heavy trench coat, remarkably similar to the one Joseph Cotten wears in the film. His hat was pulled low. I leaned in, ignoring Leo's whimpering behind me. There was no blood, no gunshot wound, no knife, just a man who looked like he had simply stopped ticking. But then I saw it. Resting on the armrest next to him, perfectly placed, was a small empty glass vial, and in his lap, a folded piece of paper. I didn't touch it, I know the rules, but I could read it from where I stood. It was a line of dialogue typed on a typewriter, not printed. In Italy, for 30 years under the Borgias, they had warfare, terror, murder and bloodshed, but they produced Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci and the Renaissance. Second, it was a quote from the movie. The famous Harry Lime speech. The police arrived 20 minutes later. Detective Miller. I knew him. He's a man who looks like he was edited out of a police procedural for being too cliché. Rumpled suit, tired eyes, a nicotine patch on his neck that he scratches constantly. He hates the Rialto. He says it's a fire hazard. Heart attack, Miller asked, looking at the body without much interest. The paramedics were already packing up. Poison, I said. My voice sounded rusty. I don't use it much. Miller looked at me, squinting against the harsh work lights we had turned on. Dr. Arthur gives his diagnosis. Based on what? Your medical degree. Based on the smell. I said calmly. Cyanide smells like bitter almonds. and based on the script. The movie we just showed. The Third Man. A key plot point involves diluted penicillin, causing death. But the mood, the quote in his lap. It's a performance. Miller picked up the note with a gloved hand. He read it, then looked at the dead man. Suicide then. Guy watches a depressing movie, drinks some poison. Case closed. It wasn't suicide, I said. Miller sighed, a long, rattling exhale. Arthur, don't start. You watch too many movies. You see plots where there are just sad, lonely people ending it all. He didn't bring the drink, I pointed out. We don't sell alcohol at the concession stand. And there's no flask on him. Just the vial. Someone gave it to him. Miller paused. He looked around the empty theater. The red seats looked like rows of silent witnesses. We'll wait for the toxicology report. Until then, stick to changing the reels, Arthur. Leave the detective work to the people with badges. He was wrong. I knew he was wrong. A projectionist notices details. We notice when a frame is out of focus. We notice when the sound is a millisecond out of sync. The dead man's coat was dry. It had been raining for 3 hours. He had been inside the theater long before the movie started. Or, he hadn't come in from the outside at all. I went back up to the booth that night. I didn't go home. I spooled the film back onto the platter. I ran the film through my fingers, checking for scratches, and then I stopped. On the leader of the film, the blank strip at the very end of the reel, someone had scratched something into the emulsion. It was fresh. The jagged marks cut through the black coating, revealing the clear plastic base. I held it up to the light. Scene 1. Take E1. A chill went down my spine that had nothing to do with the drafty ventilation. This wasn't a suicide. This was a production. And the Rialto was the set. The following week was a blur of shadows. The police ruled it a suspicious death, which is code for, we don't know, but we don't care enough to dig deep. The victim was identified as a drifter named Elias Thorne. No family, no job, a nobody. Just an extra in the grand movie of life. But the scratches on the film haunted me. A scene 1. That implied there would be a scene 2. I started watching the audience. Really watching them. From my high tower, through the rectangular glass, I scanned every face that walked through the double doors. I looked for the nervous tick, the cold stare. The person who didn't look at the screen but at the other patrons. Business dropped off even more. News of a death in a theater isn't exactly good marketing, unless you're selling a horror movie. But we were scheduled to show Dial M for Murder on Friday. Hitchcock, the master of suspense. I debated canceling the screening. I almost called the owner, Mr. Henderson, to tell him the projector was broken. But I couldn't do it. The film must go on. It's the only law I truly respect. Friday night came. The rain had stopped, replaced by a thick, suffocating fog that rolled in off the river. It swirled around the marquee lights, turning the neon red into a bloody haze. The crowd was thin. A young couple in the back row, more interested in each other than the movie. 3 elderly women who came every Friday, creatures of habit, and a man in a gray suit, sitting in the middle of the left aisle. He sat rigid upright. I felt a tightness in my chest. I wanted to go down there, shine a light in his face, and tell him to leave. But I had a job to do. The movie began. Grace Kelly's Technicolor elegance filled the screen. The plot unfolded. A husband plotting to kill his wife, a perfect crime that goes wrong because of a single detail. A latch key. I spent more time watching the man in the gray suit than the film. He didn't move. He didn't eat popcorn. He just stared. Then, halfway through the film, during the famous scene where the attempted murder takes place, the struggle, the scissors, the phone cord, I saw movement in the shadows near the emergency exit. The exit door is to the right of the screen. It's covered by a heavy velvet drape. The drape rippled. Not from a draft. Someone was behind it. I grabbed the booth phone to call the front desk, but the line was dead, no dial tone. Just silence. I looked back through the port. The man in the gray suit was slumped over. My heart hammered against my ribs like a loose shutter. I killed the lamp. The screen went black. The sudden darkness was absolute. "Hey!" shouted the young man from the back row. "What gives?" I hit the house lights. They flickered on, harsh and yellow. I ran down the stairs, my keys jingling at my hip. By the time I burst into the auditorium, the couple was standing up, confused. The three old ladies were murmuring. I ran to the man in the gray suit. He wasn't dead, he was unconscious, but around his neck, pulled tight, was a length of nylon cord. A stocking, just like in the movie, and on his lap, a pair of scissors. He was breathing shallow and raspy. I loosened the cord, my fingers trembling. The skin on his neck was angry and red. "Call an ambulance!" I shouted to the couple. Now. The emergency exit door was slightly ajar. The velvet curtain swayed gently. I ran to it and pushed it open. The alleyway outside was empty, just the swirling fog and the distant sound of traffic. No footprints on the wet pavement. The killer had vanished like a ghost. When I turned back, I saw something taped to the inside of the exit door. A piece of film leader. I ripped it off and held it up to the alley light. Scratched into the emulsion a CN2. INTR Massa Owen. Detective Miller was less dismissive this time. But he was angry. Anger is easier than confusion for a man like him. "You cut the power?" he asked, pacing the lobby. The paramedics had taken the man, another nobody, a local librarian named George, to the hospital. He would survive. "I saw something," I said. "I saw the curtain move. I turned on the lights to stop it." "You might have saved his life," Miller admitted, grudgingly. "But you also tipped off the perp. We could have caught him." "I was already gone, Miller. He moves like an editor. He cuts from one location to another without traversing the space in between." Miller rubbed his face. "Stop with the movie metaphors, Arthur. It's creepy. We have a serial attacker. 2 weeks, 2 incidents, both in your theater. Both mimicking the films on screen. You realize you're the only common denominator, right?" I froze. "Are you accusing me?" "I'm saying you have the keys. You know the schedule, you know the plots, and you're the one finding the bodies, or almost bodies." "I live for this place," I said quietly. "I would never stain it." "Passion creates strange motives," Miller said. "Don't leave town. I live in the projection booth, Miller. I have nowhere else to go." That night I didn't sleep. I sat in the booth, the hum of the cooling fans my only company. Miller was right about one thing. It was someone who knew the schedule. Someone who knew exactly which scene would provide the loudest audio cover for a struggle. I went to the filing cabinet where we kept the old logs. I pulled the employee records dating back 20 years. Ushers, concession girls, janitors. Most were high school kids who worked for a summer and moved on. But there were a few lifers. My eyes stopped on a name, Julian Vane. Julian had been a projectionist here 10 years ago. My apprentice. He was talented, obsessed with the mechanics of film. But he was unstable. He believed that digital cinema was a conspiracy to kill the soul of art. He got fired after he was caught splicing single frames of pornography into family matinees. A Fight Club trick long before the movie made it cool. He wanted to wake people up, he said. He wanted to shock them out of their passive consumption. I hadn't seen Julian in a decade. But the precision of these attacks, the theatricality. It smelled like him. I went to the workbench. I took a loupe, a small magnifying glass, and examined the piece of film I found on the door. The scratches weren't just random, they were calligraphy. The curves of the SS sinning were elegant. Julian had studied calligraphy. He used to write out the showtimes on the chalkboard in the lobby with unparalleled beauty. I had a suspect, but I had no proof. And if I told Miller I suspected a man because of his handwriting on a piece of plastic, he'd lock me up. I needed to catch him in the act. I looked at the schedule for the next week. We were doing a Noir marathon, The Big Sleep, The Maltese Falcon, and the finale on Saturday, Sunset Boulevard. The Sunset Boulevard, the story of a faded star who kills to protect her delusion of grandeur, a story about the madness of the industry. That was it, that was the finale, a scene 30 I knew, with the certainty of a man who knows the running time of every film in history, that Julian would come for Sunset Boulevard, and he wouldn't be satisfied with a subtle poisoning or a non-fatal strangling. He would want a grand ending. The week dragged. Every shadow in the theater looked like a man with a knife. I checked the emergency exits every hour. I rigged small pieces of scotch tape on the bottom of the doors, an old spy trick. If the tape was broken, someone had opened the door. Wednesday passed. Thursday, nothing. The tension was winding tighter like a film spooling too fast, threatening to snap. Saturday arrived, a sunset boulevard. I prepared the booth like a fortress. I locked the heavy steel door from the inside. I had a heavy metal film rewinder on the bench, a solid chunk of iron that could crack a skull if swung hard enough. The audience was larger tonight, maybe 30 people. The macabre rumors of the cursed cinema had actually started to attract a different crowd. Thrill seekers. Goths. People who wanted to be near the danger. I scanned them all. No Julian. He wouldn't be in the audience, I realized. He wasn't a spectator. He was the director. He would be where the action was. The movie started. Gloria Swanson's face, larger than life, filled the screen. I am big. It's the pictures that got small. I kept the volume slightly lower than usual. I wanted to hear the building. I listened to the pipes groaning, the settling of the foundation. Hour 1 passed. Nothing. Then I heard it. A soft scraping sound, not from the auditorium, from above. The Rialto has a false ceiling, a crawl space that runs above the auditorium and connects to the roof access above the projection booth. He wasn't coming through the doors. He was coming from the ceiling. I looked up at the ventilation grate directly above the number 2 projector. The screws were loose. I saw them vibrate with the bass of the movie soundtrack. I grabbed the heavy rewinder. I stood under the grate, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm that didn't match the movie. The grate slid aside. A hand reached down. A gloved hand holding something metallic. It wasn't a gun. It was a lighter. An old Zippo. And then I smelled it. The distinct, chemical stench of nitrate film. Julian wasn't going to kill a patron. He was going to kill the theater. He was going to burn it down. Nitrate film is highly flammable. It burns underwater. Once it starts, you can't stop it. We didn't use nitrate anymore. It was banned decades ago. But I kept a few antique reels in a specialized vault in the basement. He must have stolen them. Julian, I shouted. The face that appeared in the opening was older, gaunter, but it was him. His eyes were wide, shining with a manic fervor. Arthur, he whispered. His voice carried over the hum of the projector. The final cut. It has to be blazing. We have to go out in a blaze of glory, not a whimper of bankruptcy. He flicked the lighter. Don't, I screamed. There are people down there? They are extras, he spat. Props! This is about the art, Arthur! The purity of destruction. He dropped the lighter. It fell in slow motion. I watched it tumble, the flame a tiny orange dancer. It wasn't aiming for me. It was aiming for the pile of film strips I had in the waste bin. Safety film, but still flammable if soaked in. I smelled the gasoline now. He had doused the booth from above before opening the grate. I didn't think. I threw myself at the bin, kicking it across the room just as the lighter hit the floor. The gasoline-soaked floorboards caught fire instantly. A wall of heat slammed into me. The fire alarm blared. The sprinklers didn't trigger. The system was ancient and broken. I grabbed the fire extinguisher from the wall. I pulled the pin and sprayed the white foam over the flames, choking on the smoke. The fire hissed and fought back, but I smothered it. I looked up. Julian was gone. Miller. I grabbed the booth phone. It was working. He's on the roof! It's Julian Vane! He tried to torch the place. I heard sirens in the distance. They were already close. Miller had been patrolling nearby. I didn't wait. I unlocked the booth door and ran up the ladder to the roof access hatch. I burst out into the cool night air. The roof of the Rialto was a landscape of tar and gravel. The city lights twinkled indifferently around us. Julian was standing at the edge, looking down at the alleyway 3 stories below. The fog had returned. "What's over, Julian?" I yelled. "The scene is cut." He turned to me. He looked sad. Defeated. "You ruined the ending, Arthur. It was supposed to be a Viking funeral for the cinema. For us. The cinema is just a building," I said, stepping closer. "The movies live forever. You don't need to die for them." "You don't understand," he said, tears mixing with the soot on his face. I'm not the director. I'm just the editor. I'm trying to fix the pacing. Life is too long, Arthur. It drags in the second act. He stepped back, his heel on the parapet. Julian, no, he smiled. A sad, broken smile. Fade to black. He leaned back. But he didn't fall. A hand shot out from the shadows of the water tower and grabbed Julian's coat. It was Miller. He had come up the fire escape. Miller yanked Julian back onto the roof with a grunt of exertion. Julian flailed, screaming, "Let me go! It's the wrong ending!" "This isn't how it ends." Miller pinned him to the gravel, cuffing his hands. "Everyone's a critic," Miller panted, looking at me. "You okay, Arthur?" I stood there shaking, the smell of smoke clinging to my clothes. "I'm fine," I lied. "We were alive." But as I looked at Julian, sobbing on the ground, I realized the tragedy wasn't that he failed. The tragedy was that he was right. The Rialto was dying. He just wanted to give it a dignified death. The police found Julian's apartment. It was a shrine to the Rialto. Plans, schedules, stolen reels. He had been planning this for months. The murder of Elias Thorne was a test run. Julian had slipped the cyanide into his pocket while brushing past him in the lobby, knowing Thorne was a depressive who would likely take the bait of a poetic exit. The attack on George was a rehearsal for the chaos. Julian was committed to a psychiatric facility. He doesn't speak much, apparently. He just sits in the common room, watching the TV with the sound off, critiquing the camera angles. The Rialto closed 3 months later. The fire damage in the booth was too expensive to fix, and the insurance company balked. Mr. Henderson sold the building to a developer. It's going to be a parking garage. I am telling you this story from a small apartment in the suburbs. I have a digital projector now. I project movies onto my living room wall. It's not the same. The image is too clean, too sterile. There is no dust dancing in the beam, no mechanical heartbeat. But sometimes, late at night, when the city is quiet, I close my eyes and I can hear it. Click, where hum. Click, where hum. I am still the man in the booth. I am still watching. And I know that somewhere, in the great editing room of the universe, someone is splicing our lives together, frame by frame. I just hope they know when to cut. But the story didn't end there. I wish it had. It would have been a neat, clean resolution, the kind Hollywood loves. Bad guy caught, hero retires, bittersweet ending. But remember what I said, real life is a messy production. 6 months after the Rialto closed, I received a package, no return address, just a brown cardboard box wrapped in twine. Inside was a single reel of 16mm film, and a note. The note was typed on the same typewriter as the one found on the first victim. The director's cut implies the existence of a director. Julian was just the editor. Editors follow instructions. My blood ran cold. I set up my portable projector in my living room. I threaded the film. My hands shaking so badly I dropped the leader twice. I turned off the lights and flipped the switch. The grainy, black and white footage flickered onto my wall. It was footage of the Rialto, the exterior, then the lobby, then the booth. It was shot from the corner of the ceiling. A hidden camera. I watched myself. I saw myself working the projectors. I saw myself eating a sandwich. I watched myself for 10 minutes of mundane routine. Then, the angle changed. It was shot from inside the booth, looking out through the port glass into the auditorium. I saw the audience. I saw Elias Thorne, the first victim, sitting in the 4th row, and then, I saw a hand enter the frame. It wasn't my hand. It was wearing a leather glove. The hand held a dropper and squeezed a clear liquid into a soda cup sitting on the ledge of the port window. My soda cup. The camera panned back. I saw the figure. It was standing right behind me. In the footage, I was busy threading the other projector, completely unaware that someone was 2 feet away from me. The figure turned to the hidden camera and put a finger to its lips. It wasn't Julian. Julian was tall and lanky. This figure was shorter, stockier. The film spliced. New scene. The police station. Interrogation room. Julian Vane sitting at the table. The audio crackled to life. "Why did you do it, Julian?" Detective Miller's voice asked. Julian looked at the camera. Not the police camera, But this camera filming through the two-way mirror. How was that possible? I didn't do it, Julian whispered. He told me to take the credit. He said it was my masterpiece. He said if I confessed, he would save the cinema. Ooh, Miller asked. The patron, Julian said. The man in the royal box. The film ran out. The tail flapped rhythmically against the projector. Thwack, thwack. I sat in the darkness, the sound echoing in my empty apartment. The royal box. The Rialto had a small, private balcony box that had been closed off for 20 years. We used it for storage. The door was boarded up. Or so I thought. I realized then that Julian hadn't been the mastermind. He was a scapegoat. A fanatical patsy used by someone else. Someone who had access to the booth, the police station, and the hidden corners of the theater. I grabbed my coat. I had to go back. The Rialto was slated for demolition the next morning. The wrecking ball was already parked outside. A chain-link fence surrounded the property. I climbed the fence. It was easy. The security guard was asleep in his van. The lobby was stripped bare. The concession stand was a skeleton of wood and pipes. It smelled of rot and abandonment. I walked up the grand staircase to the balcony level. The door to the royal box was covered in plywood. I pried it loose with a crowbar I had brought. The wood groaned and gave way. I stepped inside. It wasn't a storage room. It was a viewing room. There was a comfortable leather armchair, a small table, and on the wall, a bank of monitors. They were dark now, but the wiring was sophisticated, and on the table, a typewriter, and a script. Bound in red leather, title. I opened it. A Scene 1 Arthur finds the body. A Scene 20 Arthur suspects Julian. A Scene 3 The fire. A Scene 40 The return. I was reading the scene I was currently living. Arthur enters the box. He realizes the truth. He turns around. See, I froze. I didn't want to turn around. But the script commanded it. I turned. Detective Miller was standing in the doorway. He held a silenced pistol. Hello, Arthur, he said. He didn't look tired anymore. He looked awake. Vibrant, I told you. Real life is messy. It needs a script doctor. You, I whispered.
Why?
Because I'm bored, Arthur? Miller stepped into the room. Do you know how dull police work is? Paperwork. Drunks. Domestic disputes. There is no art in it, no narrative arc. I wanted a challenge. I wanted to create a mystery worthy of the Golden Age. You used Julian. Julian was a useful idiot. He wanted to be part of something important. I gave him a role. The tragic villain. He played it beautifully, didn't he? And the man in the booth, in the film. Me. I've been watching you for years, Arthur. You're the perfect protagonist. Solitary. Obsessive. A unreliable narrator. Who would believe you over a decorated detective? Miller raised the gun. This is the final scene, Arthur. The hero confronts the villain. But the villain wins. It's a Noir after all. Happy endings are for children. He cocked the hammer. Wait, I said. Every movie has a flaw. A continuity error. Miller smiled. Not this one. I wrote it. You forgot the projection booth, I said. What? The booth. You filmed me. But you forgot that I control the environment. I reached into my pocket. Not for a weapon, but for a remote control. When the theater closed, I had rigged the remaining automation system. I wanted to be able to turn on the lights one last time from the street. A sentimental gesture. I pressed the button. A deafening roar filled the theater. Not lights, sound. I had wired the main sound system to a feedback loop at maximum volume. The speakers in the auditorium, massive towers of sound, exploded with a screech that shattered glass. The floorboards vibrated. Miller flinched. He covered his ears, the gun wavering. It was enough. I rushed him. I'm an old man, but I move heavy film canisters all day. I have grip strength. I grabbed his wrist and twisted. The gun clattered to the floor. We grappled. He was younger, but he was disoriented by the noise. I shoved him backward. He tripped over the typewriter stand. He fell hard, his head cracking against the corner of the royal box's railing. He slumped to the floor, motionless. The sound continued to scream, a banshee wail mourning the theater. I scrambled for the remote and killed it. Silence rushed back in, heavier than before. I checked Miller. He was breathing but out cold. I looked at the script on the table. A scene 5e. The twist. I picked up the typewriter. I put a fresh sheet of paper in it. I type. The detective is arrested. The evidence is found in his safe. The projectionist fades into the crowd. I gathered the monitors, the tapes, the script. I took Miller's gun. I wiped my prints. I left Miller there. I called the police from a payphone 3 blocks away. I used a voice disguiser, a handkerchief over the mouthpiece. Officer down at the Rialto. He found the real killer's hideout. I watched from the shadows across the street as the squad cars arrived. They found Miller. They found the hideout I had staged with the evidence I planted from Julian's stash, evidence I had borrowed before the police found it. Just in case. I made it look like Miller had been hoarding it, obsessing over it. They would think Miller was the hero who got knocked out, or the villain who got caught. It didn't matter. The ambiguity was perfect. It was a cliffhanger. The Rialto was demolished the next day. The evidence was buried under tons of rubble. I moved to a different city. I changed my name. I work in a digital archive now, restoring old films. It's quiet work. But sometimes I check the news. Miller is in a mental institution. He keeps ranting about a script, about a movie that never ends. No one believes him. He's just a crazy ex-cop who cracked under pressure. I am the only one who knows the truth. I am the editor now. I cut the scene where he killed me. I spliced in a new ending. And as I sit here in the dark, watching the digital restoration of The Third Man, I smile. Because in the end, the guy in the booth always has the final cut.